Maple Lane was a neighborhood shaped by silence and symmetry. Lawns were shaved like velvet, driveways shimmered in the morning sun, and every porch bore the exact same planter from the annual HOA-sponsored gardening day. From the outside, it was paradise. But paradise had a gatekeeper. Karen Worthington, president of the Homeowners Association for 9 consecutive years, reigned over Maple Lane like a hawk with a clipboard. Short and sharp-eyed, Karen knew every garbage collection schedule, every bylaw, and every resident's middle name. She lived in house number 5, right by the entrance, so she saw everything. And what she couldn't see, her network of rule-loving enforcers would report. So when a food cart appeared one Monday morning outside the long-abandoned house at number 17, Karen's coffee cup nearly slipped from her hand. The cart was utilitarian, stainless steel with fold-out legs and a striped canopy that rippled in the wind. But what unsettled Karen more than its existence was the woman behind it. She stood upright, composed, not looking around nervously like someone who knew they were breaking rules. Instead, she looked like she belonged. The woman worked quietly, setting up a small griddle, folding napkins with mechanical precision, and placing a sign that read simply, "Fresh. Homemade. Hot." From her patio, Karen narrowed her eyes and scribbled in her notebook. Violation number 1. Unlicensed commerce. That was the beginning. By 8 a.m., the air smelled of sizzling onions and slow-cooked pork. Several construction workers from a nearby remodel ambled over, followed by a delivery driver who parked longer than the regulation 4 minutes. Karen watched, appalled, as a resident from house number 9 bought 2 breakfast wraps and even smiled. Violation number 2. Unapproved social gathering. Karen didn't wait to investigate. She marched down the sidewalk, clipboard in hand, determination in every stiff step. The woman turned as Karen approached, eyes calm and unreadable. Her hair was pulled back into a tight bun, and though she wore no apron or name tag, she moved with the precision of someone used to command. Karen didn't bother with pleasantries. "You can't be here." The woman wiped her hands on a towel and looked at her, expressionless. "Excuse me?" Karen's nostrils flared. "This is a residential neighborhood. Sidewalk vending is prohibited under HOA Code 14B and 9C. You're blocking pedestrian access, creating noise, and releasing odors. It's disruptive." "I'm not on private property," the woman said calmly. "Sidewalk's public. And I'm not blocking anything. I'm gone by noon." Karen tapped her clipboard with irritation. "That's not the point. You didn't ask. You didn't register. And you didn't belong here yesterday, and you don't belong here now." The woman's eyebrows lifted, just barely. "I do belong here." "Look," Karen said, her tone dropping from legal to patronizing. "I don't know what kind of neighborhood you're used to, but this community has standards. We worked hard to keep it safe, clean, and, well, respectable. We don't need," she glanced at the cart, lip curling, street vending. A long silence followed. The woman's voice was quieter now, but stronger. "I served 22 years in the Army. Bought house number 17 last month. Paid cash. You might want to update your registry." Karen blinked. "My name is Sarah Mendoza. Retired Sergeant First Class. Bronze Star. And I cook because it brings me peace. Not that I owe you an explanation." Sarah stepped out from behind the cart and held Karen's gaze. The kind of gaze that didn't just look through someone, it measured them. Karen recovered quickly. "You should know, Sergeant, that HOA violations can result in fines, liens, even legal action. You may own your house, but that doesn't exempt you from our rules." Sarah smiled, barely. "I've faced worse than citations." Karen turned on her heel and stormed away. That night, Sarah received a printed notice tucked under her door. HOA violation, Code 14B, unauthorized commercial activity. Fine, $1,200. The next day, another. Code 5F, strong odors disrupting neighborhood harmony. Fine, $500. Then came citations for attracting loiterers, improper attire, and visible smoke emissions. Each day, Karen watched from her porch as Sarah opened her cart again, like clockwork. She was always clean, always respectful, always gone by noon.
But now more people came.
Not just construction workers. Residents. Curious ones. Lonely ones. People who had never dared cross Karen before. And they kept coming back. Karen's frustration boiled. This wasn't just about a food cart. It was about control, and it was slipping. She needed to make an example. The notices kept coming. Day after day, Sarah Mendoza opened her food cart just after sunrise. She moved with an almost meditative calm, laying out her fresh tortillas, checking the temperature of the meat, polishing the steel with a cloth as crisp as her movements. But every afternoon, tucked between her screen door and frame, was another citation from the HOA. They came with machine-like regularity. Violation, Code 9E, commercial odor intrusion. Violation, Code 2G, unauthorized foot traffic. Violation, Code 17C, sidewalk congestion from non-residents. It was laughable, except it wasn't. Each notice was signed in the same swirling script. Karen Worthington, HOA President. Sarah didn't retaliate. She didn't post about it online. She didn't even speak Karen's name. Instead, she kept showing up. Her silence was sharper than any retort. And that silence only made Karen more enraged. Karen began knocking on doors. House to house. Clipboard in hand, pearls on neck. You've seen the sidewalk traffic. It's unsafe. She's attracting outsiders. It only takes one to cause trouble. Do you want your property values to drop? But the neighborhood wasn't reacting the way she expected. Mrs. Carter from number 12 actually smiled when asked about Sarah. Oh, her? The tamale lady? She's wonderful. Helped me carry groceries the other day. Mr. Zhang from number 8? I had a bad night, and she gave me coffee for free. Said I looked tired. Reminded me of my grandmother. Even Ron, the HOA treasurer, Karen's longtime ally, seemed unsure. Karen, she owns the house. And she's not disturbing the peace. She's peaceful. Karen's jaw tightened. She's not following the rules. But the rules had always been a shield for Karen, not a compass. And now, that shield was beginning to crack. That Thursday morning, Karen made her next move. She stormed down to the city permit office, armed with a folder of complaints. She demanded they revoke Sarah's right to vend. But Sarah had already applied for a sidewalk use permit weeks ago, and it had been granted. Technically, legally, there was nothing out of line. Karen returned home furious. And that's when she saw it. A long folding table had been set up next to Sarah's cart. Small, neat, nothing extravagant. On it, napkins and condiments. A few chairs placed nearby. Not for business, but for community. A child sat at the table, eating a wrap and swinging her legs while her mother chatted with another woman nearby. A mailman sipped coffee and gave Sarah a thumbs up. For a place that had always been silent, this part of the street felt alive. That's when Karen snapped. She marched across the lawn, uncaring of the watching eyes, and strode straight up to the cart. Sarah was handing a sandwich to a sanitation worker and didn't flinch at the intrusion. Karen didn't ask questions this time. This ends now. Her voice shook. You are soliciting. You are disturbing the uniform appearance of this street. You are. But then she made the mistake she wouldn't be able to undo. Some ex-military reject selling grease in the suburbs like this is a street corner in Havana. The table fell silent. The words hung in the air, acidic, precise, and racist in their undertone. Sarah froze. The people seated nearby stared, stunned. Even Karen seemed briefly startled by the venom in her voice. Sarah stepped around the cart and walked slowly toward her. She didn't shout. She didn't gesture. Her voice, when it came, was calm, controlled. I'm not going to correct you, she said, because you're not interested in the truth. You didn't ask where I'm from or why I do this. You assumed. Karen's lips curled, still defiant. You don't belong here. Sarah stared at her, steady as stone. I belong exactly where I choose to belong. I fought for this country. I've bled on sand and steel so women like you could shout nonsense into peaceful air. I buried friends younger than your HOA's bylaws. So yes, I do belong. More than you know. Karen scoffed, but her steps faltered. And then a voice came from the crowd. "You tell her, Sergeant," said Mr. Olson, a retired firefighter from down the street. A few others murmured their agreement. Sarah didn't smile. She simply turned and walked back to her cart, refocused on folding burritos, her presence even more unshakable than before. Karen turned to leave, red-faced, breath sharp, and nearly collided with Ron. He held a piece of paper. "I just received 3 letters, Karen," he said. "From residents.
Complaints about you."
Your behavior today? It crossed a line. Karen blinked. "You're siding with her?" "I'm siding with decency." Sarah didn't turn around.
She didn't need to.
She'd already won that moment. Karen Worthington had never been publicly humiliated before. Not in her 9 years as HOA president. Not in her life, really. And certainly not by a woman with a food cart. But after the incident on the sidewalk, after Sarah Mendoza's measured takedown and the neighborhood's quiet shift in allegiance, Karen knew her grip on Maple Lane was slipping. She could feel it in the way people stopped lowering their eyes when she passed, in how fewer and fewer residents answered the door when she came knocking with her clipboard. And worst of all, Sarah's cart remained. Each morning, she returned.
Steady. Serene.
Unbothered. To Karen, it felt like defiance. To everyone else, it looked like community. So she shifted tactics. If the bylaws couldn't stop Sarah, maybe bureaucracy could. Karen made a flurry of calls: zoning board, sanitation department, fire marshal. She filed noise complaints under anonymous aliases. She submitted false reports about rats near Sarah's property. She even sent an anonymous tip to Child Protective Services about unsanitary food practices near children. None of it stuck. Sarah's licenses were in order. Her setup was clean. Every inspection only proved that Sarah ran things with military precision because she had lived a life where failure cost lives. But then, Karen discovered Sarah's Achilles heel. Buried in property transfer documents from the county office, Karen found that Sarah's purchase of house number 17 had one flaw. The title hadn't yet cleared its final approval because of a backlog in the deeds office. A technicality, yes, but a powerful one. Technically, the house didn't yet belong to Sarah. She lived there, had the keys, paid in cash, but her ownership wasn't officially logged in the registry. That was all Karen needed. She called an emergency HOA board meeting and presented the documents like a lawyer before a jury. Her eyes gleamed with something vindictive. "Ladies and gentlemen," she said, sliding the papers across the table, "I move to issue a cease and desist notice to the occupant of house number 17 on the grounds of non-confirmed residency and unauthorized sidewalk activity." Ron, the treasurer, leaned forward warily. "Karen, that's a technicality. The woman paid for the home." "Intent does not override procedure," she said smugly. "If she wants to operate a business, she can do it in a food court. Not here." The board, worn down by months of drama, hesitated. They voted, but narrowly. 3 for, 2 against. The motion passed. The next morning, as Sarah was unpacking trays of slow-roasted chicken, a manila envelope was delivered to her door. Inside, a formal letter demanding she vacate the sidewalk space and cease all business activity until further notice, pending a hearing on unauthorized use of HOA-regulated land. For the first time, Sarah's hands paused in their routine. She read the document once. Then again. She wasn't surprised, but she was disappointed. That afternoon, she closed the cart early. Word spread quickly across Maple Lane. Some residents watched from their porches, wondering if Sarah would pack up permanently. If the woman who never flinched, never cracked, would finally fold under Karen's relentless assault. But she didn't leave. Instead, she disappeared for 2 days. No cart. No aroma of spices. No folding chairs. Karen celebrated quietly. She mistook the silence as submission. But on the 3rd morning, Sarah returned, not with her cart, but in uniform. Dressed in full Army Class A attire, medals gleaming under the sun, she walked calmly up to the HOA community board near the mailboxes. She posted a single sheet of paper under the glass. Public notice. Formal complaint of discriminatory practices by HOA officials filed with City Council Oversight Committee, Office of Veteran Affairs, and local news media. Then, she walked back to her house without a word. By noon, the HOA office's voicemail was full. The City Council's community ethics officer called requesting statements. A local newspaper left a message asking for comment. Karen's phone didn't stop ringing. Neither did Ron's. That evening, a small crowd gathered near house number 17. Neighbors brought lawn chairs. Someone brought sweet tea. They weren't just curious anymore, they were furious. Furious that someone who had given so much to the country had been harassed over a cart. Furious that their so-called leadership had gone so far to push one woman out. Ron showed up, somber. "Sarah," he said gently as he approached her porch, "I want you to know, I didn't vote for the cease and desist. And I'm resigning from the board." Sarah nodded once. "Thank you." Karen watched all of it from her window. She tried calling board members to rally support, but 2 more had resigned by nightfall. The final blow came later that week. A letter arrived from the office of the mayor. It was addressed to the HOA. "It has come to our attention that your association has filed repeated complaints against a decorated military veteran in good legal standing. The city finds no violations in her use of public sidewalk space. Further retaliatory action may be subject to civil penalties." Karen read the letter 3 times. The walls were closing in, but she still had one move left, one desperate play. She would dig deeper into Sarah's past. Find something, anything to discredit her. If Sarah wanted to escalate the conflict, Karen would drag it into the mud. She didn't realize Sarah had already prepared for that, too. Karen Worthington sat hunched in her home office, her fingers furiously scrolling through military records databases. She hadn't slept much since the mayor's letter arrived, and the pressure of the neighborhood turning against her clamped around her throat like a vice. She couldn't accept it. Wouldn't. This wasn't just about bylaws anymore. This was personal. Her power, her pride, her reputation, it was all unraveling, and she knew exactly who to blame. Sarah Mendoza. "I'll find something," Karen muttered to herself. Everyone has something to hide. She had managed to access a military record summary. Public domain, if you knew where to look. Sarah Mendoza. U.S. Army Sergeant First Class.
Tours in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Honorable discharge. 3 commendations for valor. A Bronze Star. And then Karen saw it. A report from 2015. A redacted incident during a mission overseas. The details were murky, lines blacked out. But Karen's eyes lit up. Operational error leading to friendly fire protocol adjustment. It wasn't a scandal. Not by military standards. But Karen didn't need the truth. She just needed a shadow of doubt. The next morning, Maple Lane residents woke up to something strange. Copies of a crudely highlighted report slipped under their doors. Some were left tucked into mailboxes. Others attached to Sarah's permit notice on the community bulletin. At the top, in Karen's looping script, "What is Sergeant Mendoza not telling us?" When Sarah found one of the papers rolled beneath her cart's wheel, she didn't react with anger. She simply folded it once, placed it beneath a tray, and continued prepping her morning servings. But the neighborhood had changed. The same people who used to wave at Sarah with gratitude now seemed confused. Awkward. Some avoided eye contact. Others offered half-hearted greetings, unsure of what to believe. Karen watched it all unfold from her porch with the grim satisfaction of someone who thinks they've finally won. But what she didn't know, what she couldn't know, was that Sarah had anticipated this very move. That evening, as the sun dipped low over Maple Lane, Sarah organized a gathering. Not on her property, not as a vendor, but as a resident, a neighbor, a soldier. She invited everyone. People came out of curiosity, some out of guilt, some, like Ron and Mrs. Carter, out of loyalty. Sarah stood before them, not in uniform, but in a simple gray sweater and jeans. Her hair was tied back. Her posture was straight. Her presence unshakable. She held a folder in one hand. "Some of you received a document today," she said calmly, suggesting I have something to hide. "I don't." She opened the folder. "This is the full report. Unredacted. authorized for release under the Freedom of Information Act. She passed it to Ron, who began to read aloud. The crowd listened silently. The report detailed a mission compromised by faulty drone intelligence. Sarah's unit had been ordered to proceed based on coordinates that turned out to be incorrect. She had challenged the directive, but was overruled. When friendly fire occurred due to that flawed intel, her actions, specifically moving her team out of the predicted path, saved 4 lives. The incident had led to a change in operational command protocol. Karen's entire narrative unraveled in 1 page. When Ron finished reading, he looked up. "You saved your team," he said. "I did what anyone would have done," Sarah replied softly. "And I've lived with the weight of that day every single moment since. But I never ran from it. And I never will." Silence followed. Then applause. It began with 1 person. Then 2. Then the whole crowd. Even the children clapped, not fully understanding, but sensing something noble, something right. Karen, standing across the street in her doorway, felt the applause like nails being driven into the coffin of her control. Sarah stepped down from her porch and approached Karen slowly. No theatrics. No camera. Just 2 women facing each other, one with nothing to hide and one with nowhere left to run. "You wanted to break me," Sarah said, voice low but clear. "But all you did was remind this neighborhood of who I am. And who you are." Karen's face flushed with fury. "You turned them against me." "I didn't have to," Sarah replied. "You did that yourself." And then came the final blow. Ron cleared his throat and stepped forward with a piece of paper in hand. "We, the remaining members of the HOA board," he said, "have convened and voted to suspend Karen Worthington as president, pending a formal investigation into harassment, abuse of authority, and discriminatory practices. Effective immediately." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Karen sputtered. "You can't do that. I created this board." "No," Ron replied. "You weaponized it. And we're taking it back." For the first time, Karen didn't have a comeback. She turned, retreating into her home and slamming the door behind her. Sarah didn't watch her go. She turned instead to the neighbors, now gathered like family around her front lawn. Someone offered to bring out music. Another suggested a potluck. Someone else said they'd bring lawn chairs. And Sarah, smiling gently, said only, "I'll bring the food."